Okay, let's get into this. Picture it. It's like 5 in the morning, dead silent, and then bam! Garbage can lids banging.
Bro, yeah.
Someone's just yelling at these poor freshmen. We're the mugs, right? Wake up, let's go!
That's quite the wake-up call, straight out of the sources, you said.
Yeah, it really just throws you headfirst into what Maritime Academy was like those early days. Intense.
It really sets the scene, doesn't it? That initial, almost brutal introduction of a real crucible.
Exactly. So this deep dive, we're really focusing on the materials you shared, tracking this one person's path through maritime and their absolute drive early on to become a Navy pilot.
And these are firsthand accounts we're looking at. Leadership, tough training, that whole dream of flying.
That's right. It's not just stories. It feels more like, a blueprint for how these intense experiences shaped someone.
Sets their whole trajectory.
Precisely. So for you, the learner, listening in, wanting to get the knowledge fast and thoroughly, our mission is basically to pull out the key stuff from this journey. We're talking leadership development, the toughness of naval training, big moments like the Challenger disaster, and the sheer dedication it takes.
So we're navigating through these experiences, pulling out the surprising bits, the memorable details.
Without getting bogged down. Exactly. Keeping it engaging.
Okay, so where do we start? That early leadership role seems pretty significant. Chief Indoctrination Officer.
Yeah, straight away, pretty much. According to the materials, getting named CIO for 250 mugs, midshipmen, under guidance, that's what it stood for, was a huge deal.
A massive honor, I'd imagine. Shows they saw potential right off the bat.
Definitely. And the job involved teaching traditions, expectations, discipline, basically shaping these new recruits, the ultimate authority figure for them.
And the approach described, firm but fair. That sounds like a classic leadership challenge.
It really does. Finding that balance, right? High standards, but also being open, approachable.
Makes you think, for the learner out there, how crucial that balance is early on. Holding people accountable, but, still listening.
It's a tightrope. And the sources even mention an anonymous threat.
Really? Shows the pushback you can get.
Yeah, a reminder you can't please everyone in leadership. Yeah. But it also kind of highlights why even small rules mattered, like the shine shoes, polish buckles.
Connecting it back to the bigger picture.
Right. It was all about instilling that attention to detail needed for operating safely at sea. Nothing was really trivial.
That makes sense. Cultivating habits, a mindset where precision is just automatic.
So then moving on, the exposure broadens, right? Summer cruises on the Empire State V, then Navy cruises.
And the Courts-Mid program comes up, career orientation and training for midshipmen.
Sounds like a whirlwind tour of the Navy.
It really was, based on the description. A week with surface warfare, then subs, aviation, even the Marines.
Wow. Talk about diverse experiences.
Yeah, you get these distinct snapshots. Watching explosives with the Marines. Definitely not your typical summer.
No kidding. And then flying in an E-2C Hawkeye.
Right. And tackling the SEAL obstacle course. Spending days underwater on a sub.
It gives such a feel for the breadth of naval service. Much more than just reading about it.
Invaluable exposure for figuring out where you might fit or what truly excites you. Lived experience.
And alongside all this hands-on stuff, there's academic growth too.
Yeah.
Senior year, he's named a battalion commander for the Navy ROTC unit.
Another big leadership role. Seems like a pattern.
It does. And academically, the focus shifts to electrical engineering, which, kind of surprisingly, he starts to really enjoy.
That's interesting. Shows how challenges can unlock things you didn't expect, maybe even passions.
Totally. And there's even mention of thinking about switching to physics, maybe teaching physics or calculus down the line.
So a deeper intellectual curiosity bubbling up beyond just the immediate career path.
Exactly. It shows, for the learner, how these different experiences, leadership, academics, practical stuff, build a more rounded person.
But underneath it all, that one constant goal remained.
Navy pilot. Flying jets off carriers. That was the unwavering ambition.
And that came with its own specific pressures, didn't it? The whole vision thing.
Oh, yeah. The focus on maintaining perfect 20/20 vision sounds almost obsessive in the sources.
That constant low-level anxiety among the hopefuls, worrying about disqualification for the slightest issue.
Right. Trying everything to avoid eye strain probably did make a difference, but it shows the dedication. The stakes felt incredibly high.
It really highlights the competitive nature, how every little detail seemed crucial.
And speaking of selection hurdles, the aviation qualification test, the AQT, that was a big one.
Huge importance for where you ended up.
And what's interesting is apparently there weren't many official study guides back then.
So what did he do?
Took initiative. Made his own study materials like drawing airplane views from the cockpit perspective for the spatial awareness parts.
Wow, that's commitment. Proactive.
It really is. And even feeling good about the test afterwards, there was still that long, uncertain wait for the results. So much riding on it.
A lot of factors outside your control at that point.
And then, kind of looming over all this personal ambition, was a major world event. The Challenger disaster.
Ah, yeah. The sources describe watching it live.
Yeah, watching the explosion on TV with his roommates during Star Trek of all things. So specific.
And the detail about hearing "go at throttle up"
Oh.
and only later understanding its significance in the launch sequence makes it very real.
It does. And the initial reaction described is, well, pretty striking.
How so?
Despite seeing this catastrophe, his determination to fly, even the shuttle, apparently just got stronger. The risk almost became appealing.
That's counterintuitive, maybe. But you hear about that mindset sometimes in high-risk fields. The danger itself is part of the draw for some.
But it wasn't just about the risk. Later on, there was an understanding of the management failures involved.
Right, the warnings about the O-rings in the coal, the communication breakdowns.
Exactly. It adds that critical layer. It wasn't just a technical glitch. It was organizational, human factors, too. Makes you think about safety culture.
Absolutely. And that astronaut briefing, years later, who gives in detailing it, reinforcing the risks, but also the dedication of those who keep going.
So reflecting back on maritime, graduation in '87 was a huge milestone. A total transformation, he says, from a confused kid to a completely different person.
A real sense of gratitude towards the academy comes through. Nostalgia, too.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the sources mention SUI Maritime's growing prestige, especially in graduate salaries, ranking up there with elite schools sometimes.
Shows the value of that intense, focused education and the careers it leads to.
So with good score on the AQT, the next stop was flight school, Pensacola, Florida.
The drive down described as the redneck Riviera, that classic military town vibe.
Yeah, the Naval Air Station dominating everything, but set against these beautiful beaches. A real contrast.
Creates a vivid setting for the next phase, which sounds just as demanding, if not more so.
And talk about demanding day one in Pensacola. The eye exam wasn't just a checkup.
What happened?
He walks in, and there's a line of high-ranking officers just staring, scrutinizing every answer.
Whoa! Intentional intimidation.
Seems like it. Testing composure under pressure right from the start sets the tone for flight school.
Okay, so then comes the actual indoctrination. Naval Aviation Indoctrination, or NAVI.
Right. Weeks of tough physical stuff, swim training, survival skills.
Cross-country runs, obstacle courses. Sounds grueling.
And then the infamous Dilbert Dunker.
Ah, the simulated crash landing in water. Strapped in a chair.
Plunged into a pool, flipped upside down, and you have to get out.
And people actually failed that sometimes. That adds a layer of real risk.
Definitely. And apparently the helicopter dunker was even worse.
How so?
Same idea. Helicopter crash sim, but blindfolded, and multiple people escaping through one small door.
Blindfolded. Wow, the potential for panic. Just getting through that must have been huge relief.
Absolutely. Then the swim tests. A 1-mile swim, okay, manageable maybe.
But the other one, treading water for 15 minutes in a full flight suit and boots.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly hard. All that gear, no buoyancy, pure physical struggle.
And the survival techniques they taught. Pretty practical stuff.
Totally. Using your pants as a flotation device, drown-proofing, getting out from under a parachute in the water, helicopter rescue, with the disorienting spray from the rotor wash.
A whole curriculum for staying alive at sea.
And then there was the altitude chamber, experiencing hypoxia firsthand.
Right, learning your own symptoms. That weird progression from feeling kind of drunk and stupid.
To euphoria, confusion, tunnel vision, and then quickly becoming unable to help yourself.
The cliff concept they teach. The danger is how fast it happens and how good you might feel right before you're incapacitated.
Yeah, a really sobering lesson. And all this physical and survival stuff is happening alongside tough academics.
Aerodynamics, engines, weather, navigation, regulations. You needed the brains, too.
Especially if you didn't have a strong technical background already, it required serious dedication.
And we can't forget the survival training out in the woods. Building shelters, fires.
Navigation, foraging, and the unforgettable detail of having to kill and eat a rattlesnake.
Seriously. Okay, that's memorable. Adds a certain grit to the experience.
Huh? Yeah, you could say that. So after all that, getting through indoctrination, Life as a junior officer in Pensacola must have felt pretty good.
The sources mention feeling like a rock star.
Yeah, first real salary around $15,000 back then, which felt like a lot, with no dependents hanging out in those famous aviator bars.
Trader John's, McGuire's, places filled with aviation history, the dollar bills on the ceiling at McGuire's.
Sounds like a classic Pensacola experience for young officers, letting off steam.
But then, the main event. Learning to fly the T-34C Turbo Mentor.
Finally getting into the cockpit. Moving from ground school to the real thing.
Describe the T-34C a bit.
Propeller plane, tandem seating instructor behind the Stute, kind of a post-WWII era design, but updated. Reliable trainer.
And the flight manuals. Incredibly dense, apparently.
Yeah, requiring absolute rote memorization for emergency procedures, like engine loss procedures. He could still rattle them off perfectly decades later.
That shows how deeply ingrained that training was. Muscle memory, almost.
And then meeting your on-wing instructor, Lieutenant Lex Loletta in this case.
Your personal flight coach, basically. The one right there with you.
Exactly. Instructor, mentor, but also the evaluator, deciding your future track jets, props, helos.
A lot riding on that relationship. And getting the green bag flight suit.
Must have been a huge moment. That iconic symbol. You're really doing it now.
So that first actual flight, but the sources capture the feeling.
Oh, yeah. Intense excitement mixed with serious nerves. You've poured everything into this dream, but you still don't know if you can actually do it.
That surreal feeling of being in the cockpit, all those gauges and switches.
Yeah.
Overwhelming at first.
Totally. And the first challenge wasn't even flying, it was taxiing.
Taxiing? How so?
Using differential braking, applying brakes to one wheel to steer. Sounds simple, but apparently it felt like learning to ride a bike with everyone watching. Very awkward.
I can picture that. Then mastering the radio calls.
Another hurdle. Talking and doing complex things at the same time, trying to sound like a cool, calm Navy pilot.
But the first call is probably a bit shaky.
Exactly. The example given is pretty relatable. Feeling self-conscious about your voice.
Okay, then the takeoff itself, the rush.
Absolutely. That acceleration, the world falling away, but then the initial struggle just to keep the plane level, porpoising, bouncing up and down.
So even basic stuff like maintaining altitude was harder than expected.
Surprisingly difficult, yeah. Especially compared to later flying much faster jets. Holding a specific altitude at relatively low speed in the T-34 took constant adjustment.
And the landings, touch and goes.
Instructor makes it look smooth as silk, of course. Then the student tries. Not so smooth initially.
Takes practice.
A lot of practice. But interestingly, the instructor gave positive feedback early on for head work.
Head work, meaning?
Being prepared, thinking ahead, making good decisions, understanding procedures, even if the actual stick and rudder skills weren't sharp yet.
Yeah.
Attitude and preparation counted for a lot.
That's a great point. Flying isn't just physical skill.
Exactly. So learning visual flight rules, getting more comfortable, and then finally, after about 12 flights, being declared safe for solo.
The first solo flight. Big milestone. Nerve-wracking.
Extremely. Couldn't sleep the night before. Weather was perfect, thankfully. The flight itself went well, until the landing approached.
Uh-oh. What happened?
He deployed the landing gear way too early, way outside the normal parameters. A potentially serious mistake.
Heart must have been pounding.
Oh, yeah. Had to make that call to the tower, explain the situation. Their response was surprisingly calm, apparently.
Standard procedure for them, maybe?
Probably. They had him do a flyby so they could visually confirm the gear was down and locked. Then he came around and landed safely.
Phew. Safe outcome, but still disappointing for him.
Hugely disappointing. But it drove home that Navy, saying, there are those who have made a mistake and those who will. An early lesson in humility and the fact that errors happen.
A valuable lesson, even if it felt bad at the time. Better to learn it early.
For sure. And he used the T-34 simulator a lot for extra practice, especially landings, and apparently did really well in the graded sim flights. Made a good impression there.
Smart move. Using all the available tools, and then came aerobatics.
Yeah. Loops, rolls, spins, and discovered he actually had a natural knack for it. Really enjoyed the feeling, that sense of freedom.
No disorientation or air sickness.
Nope. Just pure fun, apparently. Made him even more excited about trying it in more powerful planes later.
But amidst all this learning and excitement, there's the reality of attrition, people washing out.
Right. Throughout training, failing the swim test, survival, academics, or busting a check flight, it happens.
The Navy invests a lot in each student, wants them to succeed.
But the standards have to be high for safety. You can't compromise there.
And the numbers are stark, right? Only a small percentage actually end up flying jets in a squadron.
Yeah, so the drive to be in that top group to get assigned to jets was intense.
Which brings us to assignment day, the big reveal.
Huge anticipation. Just waiting to find out your fate after all that work, trying to stay focused on what you could control.
And how did they find out?
Sounds almost anticlimactic. Just a simple sheet of paper tacked to a bulletin board with names and assignments.
And seeing Beeville Naval Air Station next to his name?
Pure elation. That meant jets. Advanced jet training. A massive step achieved.
You can feel the relief and joy, but also maybe empathy for friends who didn't get the assignment they wanted?
Yeah, the sources mention that too, acknowledging the disappointment of others, but still overwhelmed by achieving this crucial part of the dream.
So for you, the learner, wrapping this up, you've basically journeyed through these incredibly demanding early stages of becoming a naval aviator.
You've seen leadership forged early on, resilience built through intense physical and mental tests.
The impact of big events like Challenger and just that relentless focus needed to chase a goal like flying jets off carriers.
And hopefully some surprising details stuck with you that garbage can alarm clock.
The rattlesnake dinner, feeling like a rock star on $15 a year. Those dunker drills, wow, the landing gear scare on the first solo.
And that constant worry about keeping perfect vision.
We aimed for this deep dive to be a shortcut, really, to understanding the sheer dedication and just the range of experiences involved in this particular path.
Hopefully those aha moments came from seeing how all these different pieces, challenges, successes, setbacks fit together to shape this person's journey and determination.
And the goal was clarity and engagement, not feeling overwhelmed by all the details.
Right. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Reflect on those moments of intense pressure, but also those unexpected breakthroughs in this story.
Think about how sometimes seemingly small details, decisions, or even mistakes can have these huge downstream effects on where life takes you.
What cockpit are you trying to master right now in your own life? And what are those seemingly small details that might actually hold the key, or maybe pose an unforeseen risk?